Before he made the highest-grossing religious film in history, Mel Gibson stood at a window 12 floors up and worked out whether he wanted to keep living, not because he had nothing. He had everything: an Academy Award, a production company, a career that had grossed billions. Not because no one was watching. He was one of the most recognized faces on the planet, not because he had no way forward. He had agents, lawyers, family, money, and more options than almost any person alive. The man at the window had already won. By every metric the world uses to measure a life, he had already won. And he was calling it over. He has said it plainly, more than once, on network television. He was drinking. He was empty. And the thing he says stopped him was not a person, not a phone call, not a therapist. He said, and these are his words to Diane Sawyer on ABC's Primetime, "I think I just hit my knees." He said the prayer was one word: help. That is the origin story of the most controversial and commercially successful religious film ever produced. Not a pitch meeting, not a studio greenlight, not a creative epiphany over lunch. A man on the floor of a room he almost did not leave, saying one word to no one he could see. Stay with me, because by the end of this video you will look at the Passion of the Christ and the man who made it very differently. If this is the kind of story this channel was built for, and it is, make sure you're subscribed, because this story has been simplified for 20 years, and it should not have been. First, let us understand exactly what we are talking about. Not what people remember, not the op-eds, not the boycotts, not the cable news arguments that surrounded it, what the film actually is. The Passion of the Christ is a motion picture shot almost entirely in Aramaic and Latin, two languages no living population speaks natively. It depicts the last 12 hours of the life of Jesus of Nazareth, from the Garden of Gethsemane through the arrest, the trial before Pontius Pilate, the scourging, the walk to Calvary, and the crucifixion, with a level of sustained physical violence that earned it an R rating. Not for language, not for sex, purely for what it depicted being done to a human body, minute after minute, without relief. It was released on Ash Wednesday, February 25th, 2004. No major studio financed it, no major studio distributed it. Mel Gibson funded the production himself, reportedly writing personal checks totaling $30 million. The lead actor, Jim Caviezel, was a working actor with a solid resume, but not a name the general public would recognize on a poster. Monica Bellucci played Mary Magdalene. The entire dialogue was in languages the audience could not understand without reading the bottom of the screen. It grossed $370 million at the domestic box office, over $600 million worldwide. At that time, it became the highest-grossing R-rated film in United States history. Those numbers are real, the languages were real, the self-financing was real. And here is the hairline crack in the whole narrative. None of it, not $1, not one frame, not one word of reconstructed Aramaic, makes any sense at all unless you go back to the window. The public story of this film starts with its release. The real story starts in a hotel room in the late 1990s with a man who did not want to be alive. By the mid-1990s, Mel Gibson was not just a movie star. He was, by most reasonable accountings, the movie star. The trajectory is worth remembering because it matters for what happened at the window. In 1979, a low-budget Australian film called Mad Max introduced him. By 1987, the Lethal Weapon franchise had turned him into one of the most bankable actors on the planet. The kind of name that could open a film in any market on Earth purely by being on the poster. He was charming, he was physical, he was funny, and audiences trusted him in a way that cannot be manufactured. And then he made a decision that surprised the industry. He directed. Braveheart, a 3-hour historical epic about a 13th century Scottish rebel, was not supposed to work. It was long, it was bloody, it was set in a period most American audiences had no attachment to, and Gibson was not known as a director. It worked. In March of 1996, at 40 years old, Mel Gibson stood on the stage at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion and accepted the Academy Award for Best Director. Braveheart also won Best Picture. He had starred in it, produced it, and fought for years to get it made. He was, by that evening, operating at the absolute ceiling of what Hollywood could offer a single individual. He has described what came after that ceiling as a long, slow collapse. Not a public one, not at first. The films kept coming, the paychecks kept coming, the interviews kept coming, and in them he was still sharp, still funny, still the person the camera liked. But he has said, in interviews recorded years later that are still available and still difficult to watch, that behind the public mask, the drinking was accelerating, that the emptiness behind the drinking was deepening, that the gap between what the world saw and what was actually happening inside him was widening every month, and that he had arrived at a state he later called the height of spiritual bankruptcy. Pause on that phrase for a moment. Spiritual bankruptcy. He did not say depression, though a clinician might have. He did not say burnout, though his schedule would have justified it. He did not say midlife crisis, though the timing would have fit. He chose a word from accounting. bankruptcy, and attached it to the soul. A ledger drawn down past zero, not overdrawn, emptied. And he has said that by the time he found himself standing at that window, the ledger had been empty for a long time. He just hadn't looked at it. The timeline here is not precisely fixed in the public record. Gibson has placed this period loosely in the late 1990s. He has not named the building, the city, or the exact date. What he has described, consistently across multiple interviews over many years, to different journalists in different decades, is the same scene. A high room, an open window. A man who had decided he was finished, and then the moment when he wasn't. Here's where it gets genuinely strange. Not the despair itself. Despair is tragically common, not the drinking. Addiction in the entertainment industry barely registers as unusual. What is genuinely strange, what makes this particular story resist the easy filing systems people have tried to push it into for 2 decades, is the rawness of how Gibson has described it. His words from those interviews. I got to a very desperate place. Very desperate. Kind of jump out of a window kind of desperate. And then, in the same breath, and I didn't want to hang around here, but I didn't want to check out. The other side was kind of scary, and I don't like heights anyway. And then there is the line nobody quotes. He said he was too much of a chicken to go splat. That is the line. Not, I just hit my knees. Everybody quotes that one. That is the redemption line, the one that fits the arc, the one that looks clean in a biography or a sermon. But the other line, too much of a chicken to go splat, that is the tell. The crude, blunt, almost adolescent admission that what kept him alive in that moment was not grace, not insight, not a spiritual awakening. It was cowardice. Physical, animal, unglamorous cowardice. That alone should make you pause. Because people who are constructing a redemption story for public consumption do not include that kind of detail. They leave it out. They clean it up. They talk about a light, a presence, a voice, a moment of warmth. Gibson did not do that. He told the world he was too afraid of the impact. The crudeness is not a flaw in the telling. The crudeness is the proof that the telling is real. People do not invent humiliating details about the worst night of their lives. And then he said he dropped to his knees on the floor and he prayed. He has said the prayer was not rehearsed, not memorized, not composed. He has said it was closer to begging than to prayer. One word, help. This is not a fringe claim. This is not a second-hand report. This is what the man said, on camera, when asked directly what happened at his lowest point. And here's the second thing that converges on the same conclusion and makes it difficult to wave away. People around Gibson during this period, colleagues, collaborators, people who worked with him on sets and in production offices, have described, independently and without coordination, a man who was visibly deteriorating. Not in his craft. The craft was the mask, and the mask held. The man behind it was the one disappearing. 2 entirely separate sources, the man's own testimony and the observations of people who watched it happen from the outside. Different vantage points, different motives for speaking. Same conclusion. But it does not stop there. What Gibson did after he got off his knees was not what most people in his position would do. He did not check into a treatment center. He did not call his manager. He did not dial a crisis line or schedule an appointment with a psychiatrist. He has described, in his own words, picking up a Bible and opening it. And he did not open it where most people in crisis open it. Not the Psalms, which are the traditional refuge of the suffering. Not the book of Job, which is the text that wrestles with undeserved pain and the silence of God. He opened it to the Gospels, specifically to the Passion narrative, the account of the arrest, the trial, the scourging, and the execution of Jesus of Nazareth, the most violent 12 hours in the New Testament, the most violent 12 hours in the Western religious tradition. He has said that something in that text seized him in a way it never had before. He said he had read fragments of it as a boy, growing up in a devout Catholic household, but that the words had been ritual, not reality. He said he read it differently this time, not as doctrine, not as theology, not as the foundation of a religion he had been raised in, but as a story about a man who was in more pain than he was. The scourging, the crown of thorns, the carrying of the cross on a body already destroyed, the nails, the hours, and that seeing greater pain, described with the specificity the Gospels do not soften, made his own pain feel for the first time as if it had a structure, as if it had a shape he could hold, not explained, not removed, but held. Now, let's talk about why that matters, because this is the precise moment where Gibson's personal collapse and his professional future fused into a single object, and they have never fully separated since. He has described reading the Passion narrative and thinking, immediately, instinctively, without any commercial calculation, that no one had ever put this on film properly. Every cinematic Jesus he had seen had sanitized the crucifixion or rushed past it. 15 minutes of tasteful suffering positioned between a dramatic trial and a triumphant empty tomb. But the Gospels describe something else. They describe ours. They describe a methodical, Roman-engineered sequence of physical destruction designed to be public, designed to be prolonged, and designed by its very nature to be unwatchable. Gibson has said he wanted to make a film that did not look away. Think about how strange that really is for a second. A man who was, by his own account, at the absolute floor of human experience, who had just talked himself back from a window, read the most violent passage in the most widely distributed text in human history, and his immediate thought was, this should be seen, not interpreted, not softened, seen. He has told interviewers that the Passion narrative was not an escape from his despair. It was a mirror held up to it, and that making a film from it, translating what he found in that text into something an audience would have to sit through, was in some way he has never been able to fully explain. The thing he was supposed to do with the wreckage of himself, not drink through it, not perform past it, use it. That is a very different story from the one most people were told when the film came out. The decision to actually make The Passion of the Christ was, by every metric the film industry uses, career suicide. Not in the loose way people throw that phrase around, in the structural, financial, professional way. Gibson took the project to every major studio in Hollywood. He has described those meetings. He said the answer was the same in every room. Polite, firm, absolute. No, nobody would finance a film in 2 dead languages, with no recognizable cast, built around 2 hours of sustained graphic violence, aimed at a demographic the industry had spent decades ignoring. Same result, every time. But it goes further. He did not just fail to find financing. He has said that people he respected, friends, collaborators, people who had made him rich and whom he had made richer, warned him directly against it. The phrase he says kept surfacing was the oldest weapon in Hollywood. You will never work again. The project was not seen as risky. It was seen as proof that something was wrong with the man proposing it. And here is where it becomes genuinely difficult to shrug off. He made it anyway, not a compromised version, not an English language cut with a bankable cast and a softer rating. He made the version he described wanting to make the night he was on the floor of that room. He has said he wrote checks totaling $30 million of his own money, in an industry whose entire financial architecture is engineered so that creative talent never bears personal risk. He bypassed that architecture entirely. If the film failed, he would not owe a studio an explanation. He would owe himself $30 million. And there is the matter of the languages. This is the detail that perhaps more than any other makes the entire project impossible to dismiss as vanity or spectacle. Gibson hired Father William Fulco, a Jesuit priest, a Yale-trained scholar, and the National Endowment for the Humanities Professor of Ancient Mediterranean Studies at Loyola Marymount University. Fulco's task was extraordinary: to reconstruct dialogue in a hypothetical first-century form of Aramaic, the language as it may have sounded in Roman-era Palestine. Not modern Aramaic, which survives in small, scattered communities in the Middle East. A reconstructed dialect, assembled from fragments, from the language of the Book of Daniel, from 4th century Syriac, from period Hebrew. The Latin was classical, not church Latin. Every word in the film was built by a scholar whose career was dedicated to hearing what dead languages sounded like when they were alive. Gibson has said he initially did not want subtitles at all. He wanted the audience to experience the film the way a bystander in 1st century Jerusalem would have, watching bodies, reading faces, hearing sounds without understanding the words. He was eventually persuaded to add them. But the impulse is the point. He was not making a product for a market. He was making a record of something he believed had happened in the languages it happened in, at the volume of violence it contained. And he was daring anyone to sit through it. But the financial and linguistic risks are only part of the story. The cultural opposition was something else entirely. Before a single frame had been screened publicly, organized campaigns began to stop the film. Religious scholars accused it of anti-Semitism. Advocacy groups demanded script changes. Major newspapers ran critical pieces based on leaked early drafts. An ad hoc committee of academics and interfaith leaders attempted to intervene during production. Gibson was warned, not subtly, not privately, that releasing the film would mark him permanently. That detail matters more than people usually realize. Because this was not a case of a filmmaker courting controversy for publicity. There was no publicity machine. There was no studio to absorb the reputational damage. There was one man, using his own money, making a film in dead languages, and absorbing the full weight of institutional opposition personally. Every dollar of risk was his. Every column inch of criticism landed on him alone. And he did not blink. He did not recut. He did not soften. He released the film he made. So here's the real question at the center of all this. Not whether the film was good or bad, sensitive or reckless, faithful or fanatical. The question is simpler than that, and harder. What was driving the man? What makes a person absorb that much opposition, spend that much money, take that much personal risk for a film in Aramaic about the worst day in the New Testament, unless something happened to him that he could not walk away from? He has said what happened. He has said it was the floor of a hotel room. He has said it was a one-word prayer. He has said he does not fully understand the connection between that night and what came after, only that the connection is real. Now, we come to the detail that, perhaps more than any other anchors this entire story outside the reach of the simple explanations. The film opened on Ash Wednesday, February 25th, 2004. What happened next silenced the industry. $370 million domestic, over $600 million worldwide. The highest grossing R-rated film in American history at that time. In Aramaic, with no stars, with no studio, with $30 million of one man's money on the line. Every rule the industry used to predict audience behavior said this could not happen. It happened. Gibson has said the film was never intended as a commercial product. He has said it more than once. He has said he would have been content if it screened in church basements. He has said the scale of the response was something he did not plan, did not anticipate, and did not fully comprehend. And honestly, that's part of why this story keeps resurfacing 20 years later. Because the commercial result is nearly impossible to explain using the industry's own models. There was no playbook for this, no precedent to point to. The audience that arrived in record-breaking industry-stunning numbers on a Wednesday in the middle of Lent was an audience the entertainment establishment had spent decades dismissing as culturally irrelevant. Churches organized group screenings. Congregations bought out entire theaters. People who had not set foot in a cinema in years sat through 2 hours of Aramaic dialogue and Roman-era violence and emerged weeping. Gibson has said the response frightened him. He has said it was bigger than the film, bigger than him, bigger than anything he had a framework for understanding. The most extraordinary claim embedded in this entire story is not the box office number. It is not the languages, or the self-financing, or the cultural firestorm. It is the thing Gibson has said, quietly, in the interviews journalists tend not to quote, in the sentences that get cut from profiles, about what the film actually was. His words, "The Holy Ghost was working through me on this film, and I was just directing traffic." He said the film was given to him, not earned, not conceived, not developed, given. And he has said he does not fully understand what that means. What was given? The film, the idea, the survival, the specific night that led to the specific text, that led to the specific decision, that led to the specific outcome. He has said he knows. He has said he is not finished explaining it, not yet. Now, before you dismiss that as the language of a man performing piety for an audience that wants to hear it, consider this. Gibson's public record does not support a man interested in performing piety. His public record supports a man capable of spectacularly, publicly, humiliatingly failing to live up to the very thing he put on screen. And he has never hidden that fact. Every element of this story can be examined separately and given a conventional explanation. The despair was clinical depression. The drinking was chemical dependency. The prayer was a predictable crisis response. The film was a passion project underwritten by a man rich enough to absorb the loss. The box office was a latent market being served for the first time. Each of those framings is probably partly right. But all of them together, the timing, the text, the languages, the financing, the absolute refusal to compromise, the commercial result that broke every prediction model the industry had, and the fact that every piece of it traces back to a man on his knees in a hotel room who had just decided not to go through the window, that is a different kind of question. Not a question with a tidy answer. A question that has earned the right to stay open. Now step back and look at the full picture. In July of 2006, barely 2 years after The Passion of the Christ rewrote the record books, Mel Gibson was pulled over in Malibu for driving under the influence. During the arrest, he made anti-Semitic remarks to the arresting officer. The incident was public, it was ugly, and it incinerated much of the goodwill the film had built for him. His career, for years afterward, was effectively over. Hollywood does not forgive easily. Hollywood did not forgive. He has never denied any of it. He has never blamed it on anyone other than himself. He has said the drinking returned. He has said it returned violently. And he has said, in terms too blunt to be comfortable for anyone, including the people who most wanted to defend him, that the film did not cure him. That matters. It matters enormously. And it matters because he has never once claimed otherwise. The Passion of the Christ did not fix Mel Gibson. The prayer did not fix him. The window did not fix him. The $370 million did not fix him. He has said so, plainly. The addiction continued. The darkness continued. The public destruction, when it finally arrived, was real and it was earned. So what did the film do? He has said it was the thing he was supposed to make, not the thing that healed him, the thing he was supposed to make with the time he had after he chose the floor instead of the window. There is a difference between being saved and being given something to do with the fact that you survived. Gibson has never blurred that line, even when blurring it would have made a cleaner, more marketable story of his own life. And now, in his 70s, he's going back to the same text. The Resurrection of the Christ, it has been the continuation that has been discussed, delayed, doubted, and debated for nearly 20 years, has finished filming. 134 days of production across Italy. 2 parts. Part 1, set for release on Ascension Day, May 6th, 2027. Part 2, the following year, Lionsgate Distributing. A new cast, Finnish actor Jaakko Ootinen stepping into the role Caviezel originated, co-written with Randall Wallace. Gibson has described the scripts as an acid trip, his words, because the narrative goes past the tomb into territory the gospel writers gesture at, but do not fully map. A man in his 70s, circling back to the same 12 hours, the same text, the same unanswerable questions, with 30 more years of living, and failing and falling publicly and getting back up without asking the world's permission, behind him. The first film was about death. This one, by its title and by his description, is about what comes after death. And it is difficult not to notice that the man making it has spent the intervening decades living out exactly that question in public. What comes after the worst thing? And what do you do with the years that follow the night you are not supposed to survive? The window is still in the story, the prayer is still in the story, the arrest is still in the story, the failure is still in the story, and the man is still here, which is the part that nobody, not his friends, not his enemies, not the industry, and probably not Gibson himself, would have predicted on the night he stood 12 floors up and decided, for whatever reason, in whatever crude and frightened and honest language he used in that moment, to get on the floor instead. You do not have to share his faith. You do not have to forgive his worst public moments. You do not have to believe that anything was given to anyone by anything other than talent and guilt and desperation and luck. But the sequence of events is the sequence of events. The film is still the film. And the man who made it is right now making the next one. That is a story worth sitting with, whatever you decide to do with it. If this video made you think, even for a moment, about the distance between the worst night of someone's life and the thing they build after it, subscribe. This channel is not going anywhere, and neither are stories shaped like this one. I want to hear from you. And I want to ask directly, what stopped you? Not necessarily from a window, from quitting, from walking away from the thing, from whatever your version of the edge was. Was it the fear, the prayer, or something you still don't have a word for? Put it in the comments. There are more of these. People the world thought it understood until someone sat down and actually listened to what they said. Settled stories that stopped being settled the moment anyone looked at them again. We are still working through the list. I'll see you in the next one.